Good morning, and welcome to the second in a series of 3 customized technical trainings being offered by VEIC during the month of May. My name is Zoe Dawson, and I'm going to be facilitating today's conversation on residential energy smart spring cleaning, which seems very apt as we all eagerly await the 3-day weekend. I'm a senior consultant at VEIC, and I support the energy managed practice area that has helped to develop these condensed technical overviews for your benefit. And I'm also going to be joined today by one of our leading residential experts, who many of you already may know or have come to listen to in the past, David Keith. And we're really, really happy to see so many people registered for today's conversations from across the US. Now, before I dive in and introduce Dave, and while I see the number of attendees clicking up here, I wanted to run through a few quick housekeeping items with everybody. As with our training last week, we will be recording today's conversations, and both the slide deck and that recording will be made available to all registered participants and also available via the VEIC website by the end of this month. Again, a reminder to everybody, these trainings, while they may contain some technical content, they're not aligned with any specific CEU offering, so please just be aware of that. And to reduce feedback, participants will be muted throughout the presentation. It's not to say that we don't want to encourage you to speak up. We do encourage questions. We want your comments. We want your thoughts. Please do use the question box, though, in the GoToWebinar sidebar that's on your screen, and submit your questions at any time. We're going to try and leave roughly around 10 minutes at the end of today's conversation for Dave to respond to those directly. We also want to hear your feedback. So as with last week, if you intended that as well, we've embedded a survey link at the end of this presentation. We'll circulate that round to all of the participants after today's meeting. It takes a few moments to fill out, but it really does help us understand how we can continue to improve the delivery of our trainings to you, and really most importantly, provide information that's readily accessible in a digestible way that can help us all better engage on efficiency, help us strengthen our teams, and support our customers as well. Now, before we start getting going, again, there's a lot of familiar faces, I should say names. I know a lot of the faces as well on the list of registered participants for today, but a few quick words about those who may not be as familiar with VEIC as others. We are a non-profit, mission-driven organization, and we have experts in efficiency, building, and transportation electrification. We have a keen focus on developing new approaches for clean and flexible grid solutions. We work across the US, as the map here indicates, from the west to the east coast, but we have a global vision really to generate energy solutions that the world needs. We've been really, really fortunate to work with many of you on the line today, including utilities, energy and environmental offices, businesses, transit agents, state energy offices, foundations, and nonprofits from across the country. And critically at VEIC, our goal has always been focused on working together with our clients to help develop and deliver impact for the people that really need it the most. And today we're sharing with you one of the ways that we seek to do this, which is really by talking about our lessons learned and some of the best practices that we like to share about customizing training and how we best engage target markets and provide that critical value to our end use customers. And again, we're really excited today to be providing you with another condensed version of our 3 voted most popular trainings for the commercial and the residential market, delivered by our in-house experts. So who are we going to be hearing from today? Again, many of you may know Dave Keith's name or may know his face. It may be very familiar to you. He is a well-known teacher. He's presented at more than 1,000 training sessions on a wide range of residential efficiency programs. And at VEIC, he oversees our quality assurance for our home performance with Energy Star program. He also trains contractors on building science, best practices, and Vermont Energy Code as well. Dave provided a few little snippets here himself, and he said that he considers himself an old hippie, but I do like to also recognize for everybody who's listening today, he's the recipient of the Linda Wigginton Leadership Award, and that award celebrates visionary leaders that do extraordinary work to strengthen the home performance and weatherization industry. One of his special skills, though, which is why we're so happy that he's with us today, is his really personable approach to teaching and learning with demos and pictures and providing real life stories that really help to inspire others. So with that, what we're going to be talking about today, Dave's going to be sharing with you some tips on how to best connect with your residential customers during this extended stay-at-home period, thinking through ways that you can engage with them to support efficiency around the house, maybe share with you 20 ideas or so of low-cost and no-cost ways that residents can save money, but also opportunities that provide those added environmental and health benefits that we're so keenly interested in today. Our main focus and hope with today's presentation is to provide you with some actionable information that everybody can start using over this holiday weekend, as well as think a little bit more critically about how you might look to engage your customers through your programs in the immediate future. So I'm going to be handing things over to Dave, and again, look forward to sharing and reviewing questions with you at the end of this presentation. Dave, thanks so much.
Thanks, Zoe. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your morning. Those of you on the West Coast are up early, so I hope the coffee is good. It's a beautiful day in Vermont, and we're looking forward to a great Memorial Day weekend. It looks to me like we have mostly program management folks in one form or another on the call. That's great. What I'm going to go through is literally 20 ideas. Some of them are not huge, some of them are small things, some of them are larger things. They all have to do with energy in some way, or as Zoe said, related issues like health and environmental impacts. Most or all of these will not be new to you. You folks are largely professionals in the efficiency business, and there are probably not a lot of new ideas here, but we just basically went through and said, if we were to send a message to our customers about what they might be able to do when they're stuck at home and wanting to do something having to do with energy efficiency, what would those ideas be? So part of this is based on the idea of spring cleaning, that it is spring, but it's also partly based on the coronavirus and the fact that a lot of people are at home. So with that, we're going to dive into it. Idea number one, inspect or clean your chimneys. This by itself, of course, doesn't save any energy, but we are definitely into the safety aspect of using energy. And since I'm starting with chimneys, it's probably worth it for me to point out that, you know, I'm a Vermonter. I live in the Northeast. I've traveled a good deal doing training and such, and for other reasons, but the Northeast is what I know. That's the climate I know. That's the housing stock I know. I'm going to try to make this as applicable to as many people as possible. And I know that many of you are in places where we're not burning a lot of fuel oil and wood like we do in Vermont. But no matter where you are, some number of your houses have chimneys. And so this is a good time to remind folks that those probably should be looked at maybe annually if you're burning oil, or if you're burning wood, less often if you're burning gas, but still needs to be done. And I think one of the things that we can all tell our clients is that one advantage of doing this work at this time of year is that if you wait until September, the folks who do this work are all busy, but they're not busy in May. So there's idea number one. Number two, you may or may not have wet basements where you live, but a lot of the country does. And water in general, dampness in your basement drives the performance of the building in lots of different ways. So it's really important, especially if you're going to be tightening the building up and containing stuff in the building more. It's really important to do whatever you can to make your basements and crawl spaces as dry as they can possibly be. The photo that you're looking at there has spray foam on the crawl space wall. That's the white stuff, and the yellow stuff at the bottom is a very heavy vinyl vapor barrier. And you can see that it's been sealed around the posts and sealed to the foam by spraying the foam on top of the vapor barrier. This is a very common treatment where I come from and really across the northern swath of the country. And if we're doing an air sealing or insulation project on a building that has a damp basement, this is step number one here. You really should do this before you do anything to make the building any more airtight. Idea number 3, power strip your electronics. Again, you folks are in the efficiency business. This is not news to you, but a lot of homeowners still haven't done this. So I think a really good message to send is that yes, you do have a little trickle of electricity being used all the time in your house, and your television is using power all the time. Many of your transformers and chargers are using power all the time, and it's a really good idea to just gang those things together and shut them all off at once. And of course, you folks know that we now have smart power strips. Here in Vermont, we're pushing a lot of people to smart strips. And basically the way we describe those is, this is a power strip that once you shut one thing off, will shut all the other things off, so you don't have to remember to do all of that. Works really well for equipment in your home office, all your peripherals connected to the computer. Idea number 4, clear out the attic. Most existing houses that have attics could use an attic upgrade if they haven't already had one. That's certainly true in the older houses, but it's also true for an embarrassingly high number of newer houses built in the 80s or 90s or aughts, where nobody made any attempt to air seal the attic at all. They may have enough insulation, but there's still work to do up there. And people tend to put stuff in attics. And once the stuff is in the attic, it tends to stay there. So spring is a good time to hoe out old things and get rid of them, stuff you haven't used in decades, and it's just going to be in the way and just going to be harder to get rid of later. And if you think that you are going to do an attic upgrade, and as I said, if you have an attic and you haven't had a professional go up there and air seal and insulate it, you could probably benefit from that service, even if your house is only 10 or 20 years old. Getting the stuff out of the way is really necessary. On to number 5. Have your heating equipment serviced. Do it this time of year for the same reason you do your chimney this time of year. Because if you wait until September or October to call, then these folks are going to be busy. Also, this equipment is inside your house. You know, do you want dirty equipment in your house for the summer, or do you want clean equipment in your house for the summer? Also, you don't know when you're going to first fire that thing up in the fall. So if your service tech is busy, but it's going to be cold tonight, you may go ahead and fire the equipment up without it being cleaned. So good time of year to have that done, get it out of the way, and then you don't have to worry about it in the fall. And again, this is much more important for folks who are burning oil. On to number 6. Weatherstrip something. Your house has things that open and close, right? Windows, doors, but other things, the attic hatch. Maybe you've got a bulkhead door in the basement. Maybe you've got hatches that lead to knee wall spaces. Maybe you've got a connection to your attached garage. So this is a good idea of something that a homeowner can do when they're stuck at home. The materials are pretty widely available. It's not too difficult to do. And almost everybody has something in their house, some openable hatch or window or door, probably at least a door, that could use an upgrade. So again, something fairly easy for homeowners to do. Number 7, clean out the dryer vent. Now I want all of you, honestly, to ask yourself right now, when was the last time you cleaned out your dryer vent, and do you have any idea how much lint is in there? And I feel totally okay in asking you this question because I am embarrassed about my own personal answer to this question. So I think a lot of our homeowners are in the same boat. Some of these suggestions are things that we all know that we should do, but we never get around to it. So maybe part of our job is prompting customers a little bit to just say, you know you're supposed to do this, but you probably don't. So maybe you should. And as soon as this session is over, I'm going to run downstairs and clean out my dryer vent, I promise. Idea number 8, lawnmowers are really polluting, more so than your car. And if you have an internal combustion lawnmower, you should make sure that it's running as well as it can be. So you should get it tuned up at a minimum. And when you're ready to buy new equipment, go electric. This is my lawnmower. We bought it last summer. We still have the internal combustion one, but I'm going to get rid of it very shortly. This thing is so much better. It's so much quieter. It doesn't spew fumes in your face. It pushes easier. It's really nice. Cuts better than the old one, even though the old one was fairly decent. And I got a really big bonus advantage when we bought this mower last spring, because previous to buying the electric mower, I did all of the lawn mowing, basically about 90% of the lawn mowing, because my wife hated the gas mower because it was so smelly and noisy. We got this thing, and without making any conscious decision, just it happened, she now does about 80% of the lawn mowing. So I really like this mower. Idea number 9, get a low flow shower head. We know this, right? You know, those of you that have been in the business for a long time, like I have, we've been recommending this for 40 years. And about the only thing that I will say about this is, you know, this is something that a homeowner can do. And there is such a thing as a nice, comfortable, luxurious, low flow shower head, but you're not going to find it for 89 cents. And I will throw in an editorial comment that some of us in our efficiency programs in the past have given people things that were very inexpensive and achieved the energy savings, but people hated them, so they took them back out. And I think we did that, some of us did that with shower heads. We also did it with magnetic ballasted CFLs, you know, gave somebody a kind of a bad taste in their mouth. We have low flow shower heads at our house that we bought. I paid 20 bucks for it, and it's ridiculously worth it. The only drawback to buying a good low flow head is that now the water feels good and the teenagers will stay in the shower longer. So, you know, trade-off for everything. On to number 10. Check your tire pressures. You know, that does affect your mileage. Tire pressures in your car and in your bike. And while you're at it, you know, maybe check your oil and check the other fluids, and all of that makes sense. Again, this is a good time to do it. It's spring. We're stuck at home. I got a reminder from one of my coworkers that some of us haven't changed over our summer winter tires yet. Yes, for those of you in Tucson, we do actually put different tires on in the wintertime. And so we switch the tires out every spring and fall. So that would be another reminder for those of you who live in cold places. If you've still got your snow tires on, maybe you should take them off. It is Memorial Day weekend after all. Idea number 11. Clear out the basement, right? This is kind of like the attic, except even more people have basements, and basements have even more stuff than in the attic. And again, everybody accumulates stuff. Once it's there, it just stays there. That's, you know, it's just inertia. And all of us have stuff that we haven't used in a long time. We could stand to clear it out. And again, if you're going to do any kind of energy improvement, this becomes the first step, because when you call a home performance contractor in to give you a price on insulating their basement, and they see this kind of action, you know, the number on the proposal just went up quite a bit, because this is going to be a pain to work around. So that's one of the ways that if you are going to do energy improvements on your house and you're going to hire a pro, that's one of the ways that you can save some money, is by doing some prep work and getting stuff out of their way, rather than paying them, you know, whatever hourly rate to do all of that. So clearing out the basement is good to do. This is a good weekend to do it. It's good to do it in the spring, you know, good weather. Everybody's feeling kind of energetic to do that. And once you get it out of the way, you know, you just plain feel a whole lot better. Idea number 12. Okay, composting isn't really energy efficiency, but a lot of us are into the environmental aspect of what we do, right? A lot of you are in this business not so much for energy specifically as you are for environmental concerns. And you're working in the energy field because you know that that's a good place to make a positive effect on environmental issues. You know, speaking personally, that's the reason I'm in energy, is, you know, just to try to tread lightly on the planet. And this is part of that. And again, you know, if you live in the north, your compost pile has been frozen all winter. Now it's warmed up enough so you can get some good action going. So get out there with a fork and turn it over and get some air under there and get things rotting, and then put it in your garden. Idea number 13, insulate your band joist. This is something a homeowner can do. It's a very tackleable project. So if you have a basement and you have a band joist, by the way, this is, you probably have already figured out, this is not actually a picture of a band joist. This is a picture of a training prop that looks like a band joist. That gray area at the bottom, that strip across the bottom, is not concrete. That's actually a piece of a stress skin panel. So that's rigid foam. And the yellowish stuff that looks like 2x framing lumber, that's foam also, extruded polystyrene with spray paint. And then a sheet of 1/4-inch Luan at the top to simulate the floor decking. So we use this prop in showing people how to insulate and air seal band joists. And it's, I describe as construction because I know that some of you may be into doing educational stuff. And one of the things we like about this prop is it's full size, and it looks pretty close to the real thing. It is extremely light. The thing weighs like 1 pound. So insulate the band joist. Make sure that you tell them that you do not insulate your band joist with fiberglass bats. That's the most common thing, but that's wrong. You want to use foam. Spray foam works, but for a homeowner, we're probably talking rigid foam. So what they should be doing is cutting blocks of foam to fit up against that band joist, adhering them in some way, maybe a dab of construction adhesive, and then using the foam gun or the caulking gun to seal around the 4 sides of the piece of foam, and also the joint where the concrete meets the wood, which you can see as that lowest horizontal line there between the gray and the yellowish. So don't use fiberglass, use foam, and don't let air get out to that band joist. You got to air seal everything, because if the damp basement air touches the band joist, if it gets past the fiberglass bat, touches the band joist in the wintertime, you'll collect condensation on there and things will get damp and nasty. So insulating band joist, good thing for homeowners to do. Totally doable from a DIY standpoint. Just make sure that you tell them not to use fiberglass bats and to use foam instead. On to idea number 14. I'm realizing at this point I'm moving through these ideas pretty quickly. That's partly by design. We are going to leave some time to chat at the end, so I would encourage questions. And as Zoe said, the way to get your questions in is to use the chat function and send them in, and she'll be going through those questions at the end, and I'll address them as best I can. Idea number 14, check out your utilities website. A lot of utilities these days, as you folks know, some of you work for those utilities, a lot of utilities are providing pretty detailed information. This is partly to do with smart meters, and partly to do with, you know, just websites becoming more user-friendly. Customers can get on, they can get a lot of information. This is actually a little snip from my use at our utility at Green Mountain Power, which is the biggest utility in Vermont. Most Vermonters are on Green Mountain Power. And so any customer of that utility, and I'm sure many utilities across the country are doing this, you can hop on and see what your usage is like at any particular time, and you can drill down to, as you can see, this one is specific hours. So how much power did you consume during specific hours of the day? Most customers would only see the orange bars. The orange bars, that's the kilowatt hours that we used at the house in each one of those 1 hour segments. We have solar photovoltaics on our roof, so we're also generating power, and that's what the green lines are. So I can see at any one time how much power we're generating, that's the dark green line, and how much power is getting returned to the utility. We have net metering in Vermont, so I don't need a battery bank. Anytime we make more power than we use, it just goes into the grid and we get credited for it on our bill, which is great. I really like the idea of spending, we spend about $200 a year in electricity, and that includes all our appliances, lights, all that stuff. It also includes all of our domestic hot water, and it includes about half of our space heat. Idea number 15. Seal up some air leaks. In terms of your heating and cooling bill, in terms of your home's comfort, and in many houses in terms of your indoor air quality, sealing up air leaks is one of the most important and cost-effective things to do. Just about any house that has not had a professional go in and do air sealing could benefit from a service like that. You can go at air leaks a lot of different ways. It can be totally a contractor thing, and you are going to probably get better results that way. But homeowners can do some air sealing too. They can do some research online, maybe with their utility or other resources, find out where some of the common typical leaks are and how to seal them, and have at it. A couple comments there. One is that a lot of the action in air sealing happens in unpleasant places where homeowners don't like to go, like attics and basements and crawl spaces. The work especially in attics, is physically challenging. It's more difficult than most people think, and it's really important to get it right. So I don't normally recommend that homeowners go up into their attic and try to do air sealing up there unless I see that they are very well informed and skilled and motivated. It's more involved than most people think, and it's important enough that it's better to pay a contractor to do it right than to do a half job in the interest of saving some money. One hybrid approach, which I like, is find yourself a local contractor who has a blower door, and pay that person a couple hours time to set the thing up in your house and find some air leaks and show them to you. And then, you can seal them up. And that can be as involved or as simple as you want. It could be a single visit by a single contractor, like I said, something like 2 hours. And you follow that person around, take a bunch of notes, and then, over the weekend, buy yourself a foam gun. If any homeowners are going to do air sealing in their house, they should buy a foam gun. So explain to them that those little cans of foam from the hardware store with the straws are really just an exercise in frustration and wasted material and inability to get into the spots where you want to get. So any of you on the call who have used a foam gun can probably understand that this is the way that foam needs to be dispensed. It's much more controlled. You make a lot less of a mess. You don't end up wasting a lot of material. You use a lot less bad language, and it's just more appealing all around. So sealing up air leaks is important. I will say though that if you are going to do any air sealing in your house, there are 3 very important things that you have to make sure are handled in one way or another. One is moisture. And if you air seal your house, you should expect that it will contain the household moisture more than it has in the past. And that can be a problem in some houses. So if there are pre-existing moisture issues, we take care of those first. The other thing that needs to be handled if you're going to be doing an air sealing project on your house is combustion safety and chimneys, and the interaction between exhaust equipment like bath fans and your clothes dryer and the chimney that is trying to suck the smoke out of the house. So that has to be handled. That takes a certain expertise to evaluate whether that's an issue or not in houses. It's not terribly complicated, but it's not something that the typical homeowner is going to be able to figure out. There is a little silver lining there that most homeowners that are just, messing around on their own probably aren't going to change the air tightness of the house all that much anyway. So they're kind of unlikely to cause a combustion safety problem, but it's still possible. Some houses are kind of on the edge and don't need much to knock them over. So you want to make sure that this is handled in one way or another, and that somebody that knows what they're doing has taken a look and has evaluated that. And the third thing that needs to be considered when you're doing an air sealing project is mechanical ventilation, and to make sure that we have enough ventilation in the house. That's really important. All houses should have some amount of mechanical ventilation. There's no such thing as a house that's leaky enough that it shouldn't have at least a bath fan where the showers mostly happen. And most of us want something better than that in terms of ventilation. Especially now, there are a lot of people in both commercial and residential settings raising brand new questions about how much ventilation we should be doing and whether we should be continuing to ventilate the way we have, or whether more ventilation is in order, at least part of the time, from an air quality standpoint, bearing in mind that we have a very significant virus of concern. And if we have equipment that's blowing air all around and pulling air out of some spaces and pushing it into other spaces, we got to wonder about that. And so a lot of people are wondering more about ventilation these days. So air sealing, really good thing to do. Tends to be very cost effective in terms of energy benefit. It can have a positive effect on indoor air quality. It not necessarily, doesn't always, but bear in mind that sometimes the problems that we have in our house because of the indoor air quality problems that we have in our house are because of stuff that gets picked up on the way in. So if your house is leaking air in through a damp, musty crawl space, that air isn't really fresh air by the time it hits the living room. If you have an attached garage and the air comes in through the garage, that's not really pristine air. I would like to say just a brief word about attached and tuck under garages in this context, because attached and tuck under garages are a fundamentally bad idea in terms of air quality in houses. It's almost impossible to get a real air seal between the garage and the house. Even if you have somebody that's really good, and even if they make a heroic effort, it's almost impossible to get all the air leaks. And I say this as quite an experienced air sealer. It's really, really hard to get them all. And even if you get them all, you don't get them all, because there's always that walk-in door. There's always that walk-through door between the garage and the house, and that's never airtight. So we want an absolute air seal between any attached garage and the house, and we can never get one. The other thing to think about with garages is that they tend to contain a lot of stuff that we don't want in the house. We put it in the garage because we don't want it in the house. But if the garage is attached to the house, then all that stuff is still in the house, because most of the airflow between the garage and the house in the season where we're concerned about it is from the garage into the house, almost never in the other direction. It's partly because of stack effect, because as soon as it gets chilly outside, the house starts sucking on the garage, because the house is warmer than the garage and it's taller than the garage. And the garage is always attached to the house at the bottom of the house, not at the top. So stack effect alone means the house sucks on the garage during the entire heating season, just like the house sucks on Mother Earth. on the basement floor. It also sucks air in from the garage. So it's impossible to get an air seal there, 100% air seal. Most of the airflow is from the garage into the house, almost never in the other direction. And we've got a lot of stuff in the garage that is of concern. And sometimes you might get a reaction like, well, don't worry about it, because we never put our car in the garage. Because you talk to people about this, they immediately go to carbon monoxide. And so they'll say, well, don't worry about it. We never put the car in the garage. Or maybe when we start the car up, we move it out of the garage right away, so it doesn't have time, to really create any effect. So a couple points there. One is, if you start your car up in the garage and pull it out of the garage 10 seconds later, that's long enough to load the entire garage with carbon monoxide. And then you close the overhead door, you trap the carbon monoxide in the garage, and then over the next couple hours, it all migrates into the house. For the people who don't put their car in their garage, never, it's always for the same reason. There's no room for it. And there's no room for it because of all the other crap you got in there. And what do you have in there? Well, you might not have a car in there, but you got other internal combustion engines, like where I come from. We got lawnmowers, we got snow blowers, chainsaws, weed whackers. We've got motor oil, transmission fluid, brake fluid. We got solvents. We got half full cans of paint. We got varnishes. We got herbicides. We got pesticides. We got all that crap out in the garage because nobody would ever put that in their house. So my point is, if the garage is attached to the house and that stuff is in the garage, functionally speaking, that stuff is in the house. On to number 16. Consider a cold climate heat pump if you live in a cold climate. Those of you in the South, you've been using heat pumps for years. Across the northern swath of the country, we're getting a little bump in popularity of these. Heat pumps didn't make sense in certainly where I live. We got 7,000 or 8,000 heating degree days, and the equipment just wasn't up to par. At 20 below, it's pretty hard to suck much useful heat out of the outside air. But that's changed, and we now have equipment that can function in that regard. And we're seeing an awful lot of heat pumps go into houses around where I am. We got one a couple of years ago. A lot of times in the retrofit market, if you're building new and you build smart, there's no reason why you couldn't heat your whole house with this. But in the retrofit market, what we're often seeing is people are keeping their central systems, they're typically fossil fuel, but they're eliminating most of the use of the fossil fuel system by using the heat pump whenever they can. And that's a perfectly reasonable strategy. Electricity is not environmentally free, but we do have a comparatively clean-ish mix in Vermont. And certainly it's a lot better than burning LP or fuel oil in terms of environmental. So consider a cold climate heat pump if you live in a cold climate, because the equipment is capable of heating your house now, which it didn't used to be. And another thing that we've noticed, where I live, we already have climate change, no doubt. I don't know if you are physically feeling it where you live yet in a sizable enough way to be not only measurable but clearly obvious to everyone. But I live in a place where it is clearly obvious to everyone. And one of the things that is happening here is that our summers are getting more humid. And I've lived in the same house for 35 years. And in the last couple of years, we've started to see humidity issues in August that we've never seen before. And that was part of the reason for me buying a heat pump. And last summer, we just ran, for most of July and August, we just ran the heat pump on dehumidify mode. And that made a fair bit of difference. Just drop the temperature in the house just a little bit, but drop the relative humidity in the house enough to make a difference. The technology is there now. So if you haven't looked at that yet and you live in a cold place and you want to reduce the amount that your fossil fuel system runs and get some air conditioning along for a bonus, it's a good thing to look at. Number 17. Take a look at how much fossil fuel you are using. These are my LP tanks. They're dirty, which at first I thought I don't want to take a picture of dirty equipment and put it in the presentation. Then I thought, you know, LP gas is dirty. So it's appropriate. And I think it's good for all of us to take a look at how we use fossil fuel and just try to minimize that as best we can. And a lot of that is in our house. Speaking personally, I'm looking more at transportation now because I've tried to do what I can in my house, and I've knocked my fossil fuel use in the house down by about 90%. It's going to be hard to get the last 10%, but our vehicles now are much bigger deal in terms of our carbon footprint than our house. So it's kind of a comprehensive thing. And who knows what form it takes. You know, maybe part of it is looking at your fuel bills. Maybe part of it is hopping online and doing some of those carbon footprint calculators. That's a great thing to do, you know, when you're stuck at home. You can do that over coffee in the morning and then make some choices. And you don't necessarily have to get to zero, and you don't have to get all the way today. Steps in the right direction are good, even if they're small steps. Idea number 18, electric transportation. Again, this is an area where the technology is sound now. Electric cars are cheaper than gas cars. They may be more expensive to buy on the front end, but you take a long-term view, they are already cheaper when you take the purchase price and the operating cost into account. Already cheaper than fossil fuel vehicles. So anyone who's buying a new one should really look at electric, and you should look at, you know, used electrics if you can. The technology is new enough that at least in my area, there's not a whole lot of used ones on the market, but you know, maybe some of you folks out in California, maybe you've got more electric cars around, maybe you have more used ones. Personally, I'm looking at electric bicycle and whether it makes sense to replace my motorcycle with an electric motorcycle. So worth looking at, especially if, you know, your current vehicle is, you know, nearing time for replacement, or maybe you just want to drive that vehicle less. You know, maybe just like you get a heat pump, not to replace your fossil fuel central system entirely, but just so you have to use it a lot less. Maybe you could do the same thing with transportation. Maybe you've got an internal combustion car and you buy an electric bicycle and you use the electric bicycle for the short trips, something like that. Again, you don't have to get there all the way in one step. You don't have to get there all the way today, but any step in the right direction is a good step. Number 19. Check for what kind of incentives are available in your area. They may come from your utility, they may come from somebody else. This screenshot is from Efficiency Vermont's website. In Vermont, we have what we call an efficiency utility. So that entity, which does not sell electricity, delivers almost all the efficiency programs in the state rather than having the utilities deliver them themselves. However you do it, there probably are some sort of incentives available, and those are worth looking at. I know that Efficiency Vermont has lots of incentives for lots of different stuff, both residential and commercial. And what I'm fond of telling folks is anytime you're replacing any kind of appliance, any heating or cooling equipment, any lighting equipment, any motors, anything like that, go to the website and see what's available there for incentives, not just for the incentive itself, but there's also going to be resources there that will steer you toward the more efficient makes and models, and that's a good thing too. And I'm coming up on 10:45, so my timing is right on par with what we wanted. And with a drum roll, idea number 20, which is near and dear to my own heart. We have an awful lot of existing homes in the United States, and they use an awful lot of energy. And no matter what we do with new homes, it's really important that we get into these existing homes and we do major upgrades to really knock down how much energy they're using. And many states have a formal program for this, often called home performance. We have a pretty vigorous home performance program here in Vermont, small scale because Vermont is small scale. But we have trained and certified contractors who are going out and fixing homes according to BPI specifications. We have a quality assurance system. We have rebates for homeowners. Homeowners in Vermont these days, if they do a modestly sized home performance project, can get half of it paid for. And they can get reduced rate financing, in many cases 0% financing for the rest. So wherever you are, it kind of depends on what's available to you in terms of programs and services. But even if there's nothing to help you pay for it, it's really worth considering doing. The biggest problem in the places where there is no program is that it's hard to find contractors who are good at this stuff. Because many times, in the case of Efficiency Vermont, the same entity that's running the program has done an awful lot of training for the contractors and has gotten them to agree to work to standards and that sort of thing. And that's difficult to find sometimes if there has not been a formal program in your area. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Zoe, and we've got 10 or 15 minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you for going through all of those, really, really like helpful ideas and suggestions, and for me, I think, a big take home is just to remember that, for something to be effective, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. The examples that Dave provided here, are just things that, we each individually as, homeowners or renters, can do to help impact our overall energy bills. They're also importantly activities that you can help support your customers through your programs or through your contracting networks, help them fundamentally reach their number one goal, which is saving money, but also help advance other goals related to environmental and health concerns and health benefits too. So, I think, there's a lot of good things to take away from this, as it relates to what type of design options or program optimization efforts you can align here. And, I think a number one thing that I always think of is when we look at attic and basement clearing, those are some fundamental behavioral changes that need to be aligned with the incentives that support the insulation. So lots of good fodder to think about and lots of things that hopefully you will take away with you over this weekend. So right now I'm going to go and have a quick little look through any of the questions that you might have been putting in. Again, if you have a question that you didn't mark earlier, please just use the chat box or the question box on the side. Looks like we've got one here that's digging actually a little bit more, Dave, on ventilation. I think that seems to be a fairly hot topic right now with everybody trying to figure out what we need to be preparing for in our buildings in a post-COVID environment. Could you please speak a little bit more towards balancing correct ventilation in building and indoor air quality?
I think the most fundamental thing is that you have to agree on the first principle that you want the building to be airtight and that you want to be in control of your ventilation. So as opposed to, let's leave the building kind of leaky and hope for the best. That's kind of the traditional approach to residential ventilation, right? You might have a little fan in the bathroom you turn on occasionally when you take a shower, but for the most part, it's just like, the wind blows through the house, we kind of hope for the best and, don't seal it up so it's too tight. That's the wrong way to look at it. All uncontrolled air leakage is bad. So we want to minimize that as a first principle, and we want to provide the ventilation that we want. We have at least 3 or 4 national standards for ventilation. There's ASHRAE 62, but the Passive House system has their own standard. The Building Science Corporation has their own standard. Here in Vermont, we have a simpler standard that was based on the old ASHRAE 62. So there is direction on how much air we want and how to provide it. We don't have a lot of good information immediately about how the coronavirus relates to our ventilation needs. I think raising the issue that, maybe we should be ventilating more, at least some of the time, kind of makes sense. I don't know actually what that means for residential ventilation rates. It does, certainly the concept of flushing, which may be more applicable to commercial projects than residential, but certainly the concept of flushing makes sense to me, where, you have one activity in a space that's kind of over with, maybe those people are gone, you get very aggressive for a short period of time with ventilation to prepare for the, to basically cleanse the thing and get ready for the next. I would say that looking forward on residential ventilation systems, especially with the coronavirus in mind, I've always thought that this is a good rule of thumb anyway, but even more so now, is don't size the system for exactly the air that you think you want. Size the system for more and give yourself the ability to ratchet down. So, don't put in a ventilation system where it has to run 24/7 to just barely give you the recommended amount of ventilation. Put in a higher capacity system and then either run it at part volume or at part time, so that your system does have the capacity to bump up if you decided you wanted to do that. And that's great in a general sense anyway. I mean, if you have a big party at the house, or maybe you're painting, or you got some other thing that you're welding in the spare bedroom or something, everybody occasionally has events in the house that, it'd be great to have a little extra ventilation right now. So I think that would be one kind of general rule, is don't be stingy on the sizing of the equipment. Just make sure that it's energy efficient, and that you have the capacity of running it, either at part volume or at part time, to allow you that capacity to boost up if you need it.
Great.
Not sure if that was helpful or not.
No, I think that's a very good point, was just provided back. So thank you for that, Dave. Another quick question that came in here as well is whether you had any insulation choices when you're doing a remodel or building a new home that you could provide.
Speaking personally, I've become much more concerned with embodied carbon and greenhouse gases and other environmental effects of insulations. I'm becoming less of a fan of plastic foams than I used to be. I still use them, but much less, and I've tried to find ways to not use them. And I have learned more recently about sequestering carbon in buildings by using carbon based insulations, as opposed to using insulations that not only do not sequester carbon, but also release a lot of greenhouse gases. I'm trying to move away from plastic foams and only use them where we have to. I'm trying to move to either inert materials like rock wool, or organic carbon-based materials. And as soon as you look at things in that way, the old faithful cellulose insulation looks really, really good. And blowing cellulose into walls and attics of houses looks really, really good in terms of its effect on the planet. So I will throw that suggestion out there. We also, rock wool is starting to be used more, and it has some very desirable traits, including the fact that it doesn't burn, and including the fact that we can use it as an exterior continuous insulation without trapping moisture in the wall, which is an issue when we're using the foil-faced foam. And just one other thing on that one, there are a lot of exciting new insulations that are kind of cool. So, you can insulate your house with cotton. You can insulate your house with wool. You can insulate your house with rice husks and hemp and cork and mushrooms, literally. So those are the kind of the insulations that I'm currently excited about.
I think my question would be, do we have incentives on those? But the next question that I've just received here is whether we talked a little bit about various different building envelope upgrades. Can you speak to any benefits for upgrading windows, Dave?
You should save your windows for last. They're probably going to be the least cost-effective bang for the buck thing that you're going to do in the building, which does not mean that you shouldn't do them, but it probably means that you shouldn't do them until you've already done the other more substantial, more important, more bang for the buck things. Homeowners love to replace windows because they're shiny and new, and unlike the other work we do, you know, you can look at them and they're there in your face to remind you of what you spent your money on. And certainly new windows can improve your comfort. So I would say two things. One is don't spend 5 figures on new windows unless you have a very well sealed and insulated shell to begin with. Once you have made the decision to buy new windows, please, please, please do not go to Home Depot and buy the cheapest vinyl stuff on the shelf. And I'm not slamming Home Depot. That's just an example. But do not buy the cheapest windows because they are no better than the ones you had before. So either don't replace them or replace them with good ones. So that's my 2 cents on windows.
Great. There's another quick question that came in as well of, you know, what are some minor adjustment or behavior practices that I can do as a renter? Again, noting that we did spend most of the time talking about homeowners. Do you have any advice or tips for renters out there?
Yeah, just like your dad used to tell you, turn off the lights when you leave the house. Do the power strip thing. If you do not have a low flow shower head, you could buy your own and put it on. If you're going to be there any length of time, then that's probably worth it. And if you choose to, you could take it with you when you leave and put the old one back on. Same thing with light bulbs. Inventory the light bulbs. Your landlord probably left you with incandescents, maybe not, but take a look at what you have for lighting. And if you aren't up to speed on the lights, go and buy some screw-in LEDs. Take all the old inefficient ones out, put them in a cardboard box in a closet, screw in the LEDs, and then when you leave, take your LEDs with you and put the old ones back in. Also, if you live in a cold place and you can identify where the cold wind is blowing through, you know, a caulking gun and a couple tubes of caulk doesn't cost that much. And if you live in a cold place and you're in an apartment that has old leaky windows, you know, those interior storm window kits with the flexible plastic that, you know, either sticks on and you smooth it out with a hair dryer, or maybe it has a little track that goes around. You know, those are ugly, but they work and they're cheap. So that is one of the things a renter could do, is get some good light bulbs, get a good shower head, get yourself a power strip, shut things off when you're not using them. And if the wind's blowing through your windows, put some of that cheap plastic window kits on. So there's a few ideas.
It's great. Thank you, Dave. I think it's also just some good refreshers of how to effectively market different program DIY opportunities for your customers for both the rental market and for the homeowner market. So I think we've got time for one more quick question, and then I'll do a quick wrap up of what's coming up next week. And the question is if you could provide like a quick comparison or maybe your thoughts of both air to water heat pump improvements in the market uptake of either of those in the residential field.
I'm very interested in air to water heat pumps, but I'm not an expert in that. I'm not really a mechanical guy. I am keeping a close eye on it because I'm planning to do it in my own house. Right now, I have an LP boiler and a radiant floor, and I would like very much to move to an air to water heat pump. I have 2 problems. One is that in our climate, we may still be on the bleeding edge. And then the other thing for me is it's hard for me to justify replacing, a perfectly usable high efficiency boiler that I only put $100 of fuel through a year. So I'm waiting for the technology to mature just a little bit more, and for the price to come down, and for in our area for a chance for a couple installers to get good at them. So I think it's a very promising technology. I fully expect to have an air-to-water heat pump in my own house sometime in the next decade. The economics are making it hard for me to go there quite yet.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for your time answering those questions. Again, just a reminder to everybody, we will be, entertaining and, obviously happy to respond to any additional questions that you think of after today's conversation as we look forward to next week's activities. We hope that you will come and join us again, Friday the 29th, again at 10 a.m. Eastern, where we're going to be focusing on the commercial aspects of HVAC opportunities, again, looking at how you can maximize energy savings in a low to no cost manner that also address some of those important environmental and health benefits that we're keen to learn more about. Again, if you haven't registered, please go ahead and do so to make sure that you receive the recording of that webinar and also the slide deck itself. We will be sending you this URL link. We want to know how we did. We want to know what more information you'd be interested in hearing from us. This was, a very, like light touch, high level, informal conversation about simple things that we can all do at our own homes, as well as simple things that we can advise our customers to do in their homes. But again, we have the expertise of Dave and others on our team, and we're happy to go deeper on topics that could be of interest to you. So for now, this is my contact information. Again, Zoe Dawson with VEIC. Look forward to hearing from everybody. And on behalf of Dave and myself and everybody who's been helping to support these trainings, we all hope that you spend a really enjoyable and safe, relaxing Memorial Day weekend with your family and friends, and look forward to welcoming you all back next week. Thanks so much.